Hello everybody, how's it going? It's me, Krendor, and today we're going to be talking about Age of Sigmar 4th Edition, primarily what I want to change in Age of Sigmar, what I hope changes, what I think will happen, good, bad, what they've already said, pretty much just a big overview of Age of Sigmar 4th Edition. My last video was me being like, whoa, Age of Sigmar 4th Edition, but this is more of an in-depth analysis of 4th Edition and what I think they're going to do and change. So let's open things up just by jumping right into it. So here are some quotes that they actually have said in the interview on the live stream, right? So they specifically said they do not want to lose the flavor and lore of the War Scrolls. And I think that's really big, because I think a lot of people have had the issue with 10th edition 40K where they say, my army just feels too generic, right? My army feels very similar to other armies, much like how in World of Warcraft you might say, I'm playing this class, but it feels like I'm playing any class, right? All the classes feel the same. And so I think the Age of Sigmar team has actually done a good job of this throughout Age of Sigmar. Specifically, I think in 3.0, I think they did a great job with making armies feel like the army that you're playing. Like when I play Nurgle, I feel like I'm playing Nurgle. When I would play Beast of Chaos, I would feel like I'm playing Beast of Chaos, right? A lot of times it seems like some games struggle with that, but it really does feel like Sigmar has done that pretty well. In fact, I'd say Warhammer Fantasy also does this extremely well. Old World specifically is what I'm referencing, because I've been playing a lot of Old World. And when I play the Tomb Kings, I feel like I'm playing Tomb Kings. You're kind of slow. You're just throwing stuff at people. You're bringing the skeletons back to life, but nothing ever felt like overpowered or too crazy when I'd play them, right? Or the same with Beastmen. Where, they're getting frenzied, but sometimes they, it's to their own detriment. They're just charging out into the middle of nowhere. They're becoming stupid, right? They're trying to pray to the chaos gods, and the gods like, you idiot, and then you're stupid. Like, there's a lot of flavor there. And so I trust the Age of Sigmar team to keep the flavor, primarily because they've been pretty good at it so far. I think there's a lot of people out there being like, it's going to become like 40K. And, this is a completely different team. Sure, it's the same company. But the fact that the 40K team pretty much was trying to copy the Age of Sigmar team in a way should probably say something. Like, I think it shows that the Age of Sigmar team actually knows what they're doing, and they're pretty good at it. And so that's why I have more faith in them. Now that is kind of just, I'm just being optimistic. It could be bad, it could be whatever, but that is the reason, is because I think they have a decent track record. Enough for me to be like, all right, let's see what you got, right? So next up, also, I don't know why my robot guy is showing up on the green screen here. He's just a little robot guy. So they also mentioned that they lined up every model and determined what the wound should be, save, movement, etc. And I think this kind of ties into the flavor of the War Scroll, because there's so many times this last edition, which this is one of the things I'd criticize them a bit about, is because there would be War Scrolls I would see, for example, Kroxigors, and they gave them like 4 wounds and a 4-up save. And I was like, this doesn't really make sense, right? Like, to me, a Kroxigor is this big, tanky dinosaur. It should have like 5 wounds. It should be hard to hit. It made sense to me, right? It should have like a 3-up save, 5 wounds. I don't care if it costs more points. It feels like that's what it should be. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping they do. Like, they make the unit feel like what you think the unit is, because that's what I think they're trying to go for with simplicity. Because if you're playing against somebody, right? You're playing against a new player, and they don't know what your army does. What they do know is what they see. And if they see that you have these big dinosaurs that are standing on the objective, you're like, wow, those must be strong. They must be tanky, and they're probably decently hard to kill, right? That's probably what would go through my mind if I see Kroxigors. Like, they're probably tanky, hard to kill. And then you tell them like, oh yeah, they actually die pretty easily because they're not in the coalesced faction. And even then, they died of mortal wounds. They're actually pretty garbage. And then you're like, oh. So I think I think they are really trying to make it more, like they said, they want to determine what every single unit should be realistically. And so I think the way you play around that is obviously you increase the point totals of things. But I think once you have the right War Scroll for something, then the point value is much easier to change, right? It's harder to change a war scroll where it's printed in books, it's printed, you know, it's on the app, you have to update the app with all that. With like points, it's like you just change the point value and there you go. It definitely seems much easier to balance around and all that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm hoping, is that they do a good job with the war scroll stats and abilities and all this stuff, and then the points are just things they have to work around, and that'll come with time, right? That's really what I'm hoping. So next up, we move on to something that I heard them say, which is they were referencing Spearhead in this. So this is like the combat patrol for Age of Sigmar, kind of like the starter edition, but you can still play it if you're experienced. It's just like a shorter version of the game. So I'll try it out, whatever. He said you're still going to have command traits and artifacts in this mode. So what that tells me is that the main game still has command traits and artifacts, because I was curious if they were going to keep those, right? Because they're sometimes, or I guess I'm more curious if they're going to keep the generic ones, or if how many they're going to give each faction. There's a lot of questions I have with command traits and artifacts, and I genuinely was like, are they going to bring them back, or are they going to go to a different system? But it does seem like they're keeping them, so that's all right. It's like anything, command traits and artifacts, some are broken, some are absolute garbage, some are okay. That's just what it was. Most people end up just taking one of them that's really good. Some are like you take for a meme. The brass orb, for example. I never got the brass orb to work. So that's the thing. You know, I don't really have a big opinion on that. Just cool. I hope they do a good job with them. Then we have the big thing that a lot of people are talking about, which is the universal special rules. And this is, I think this can go either way again, because the example they gave, I think, is a fair example, which was the banner and the musician and all this stuff, right? So when you play an army right now, sometimes the banner gives you +1 to, I don't know, hit. Sometimes the banner gives you +1 bravery. Sometimes the banner is -1 bravery to your opponent. Like, you never know unless you play all these armies and you figure it out. So I think by going with this Warhammer Old World style universal special rule with things like banners and musicians and everything, I like that a lot more, right? If you know your opponent has a musician, you're like, oh, they have +1 to charge or +1 to run, whatever it might be. So I think that's great. I think it's much easier to understand that. It cuts away a lot of the, like, I don't know what that, I mean, you could say that is taking away some of the flavor, but to me, that's some of the flavor that I could do without, is trying to figure out what an opponent's banner does. Like, you can add that in somewhere else, right? Like, you could be like, oh, but I love when my beastmen have +1 to charge. Well, then take their +1 to charge and put it like somewhere on their war scroll, like as an ability, or maybe when you pop all out attack, like I said, when you pop some sort of like maneuver ability, like a redeploy, that gives them +1 to charge their next turn, right? Like, you could play around with it and still keep flavor in those ways. So I don't know. I think the issue with universal special rules is when they go overboard with them, and make just everything a universal special rule, which I don't think they're gonna do. I think they're gonna go somewhere between, like, obviously they're gonna go a little 40k because they have a lot of universal special, but I think Warhammer Fantasy Old World is another example of universal special rules, and they have too many universal special rules in that game. So I think a nice middle ground would actually be all right in Age of Sigmar, because, you know, Old World has universal special rules, but it's also very flavorful still. So it's not like it's a bad thing. I think people just hear it and they attach a bad, you know, aura around it or whatever, but I think it can be done well. So I'm hoping that they do it pretty well. And from the example they gave, I was like, that's a fair thing to make universal, right? So that's how I'm feeling with that. I'm optimistic with that as well. Next up, I want to talk about army building, because this one's pretty big. Like, building your army for some people is the game. Like, I don't like 40k army building. I didn't really like it in 9th edition, and I liked it more in 10th edition until recently, where I was like, I feel like there needs to be structure. There needs to be some sort of structure there, instead of like, go at it, have fun, do what you want, right? And at first I was like, yeah, this is cool. And then playing something like Old World, again, I keep go in the old world because I've played a lot of old world recently. I think I enjoy that format better, where they're like, all right, you can have 25% of your army is like core, 50% can be like whatever, another 25% has to be like characters, right? In terms of point values. And I think that's really, it's a great way to do it because it gives you the freedom to build, but it's also making sure that you have some resemblance of a realistic army. Right? And you can't just overload on one thing, which I think is kind of dumb. I think there does need to be structure. And then I think having the way Old World does it, where you can also have like different, like the arcane journals, like battalions in a way, where you have different ways to construct your army, where like, oh, I'm going to take this style of army where my core, instead of my core being, I don't know, gores or whatever, it becomes, minotaurs or something, right? If you take this specific thing, I guess you can also get that if your general is the guy, right? A Doom Bull. Like if you have a Doom Bull general, you take Minotaur core, right? And I think having a few options to get different units as core is good. But like I want core. I want my opponent to have to take some sort of core unit that is like their battle line, right? I feel like that just it's supposed to be an army game. Like I feel like you need to have structure. So I do think they're going to keep that structure. I hope they do. It doesn't have to be Warhammer Old World, right? It could be similar to what they do with current Sigmar. I think current Sigmar is a little restrictive, but especially with like reinforcements and stuff, but I would much prefer the percentage system. I think Old World's army building's great. I don't even need the complexity of Old World's army building where I'm picking musicians and adding shields and magical items and what, like I don't need all that for Age of Sigmar, but I would like a similar style of point distribution is what I'm saying. So I could talk about all the phases next, but I'm going to mention scoring next because I'm not a big fan of the current Age of Sigmar scoring. I initially liked battle tactics, and the more the game went on, the more I hated battle tactics. And I think there's a few things that go into that. Number one is book battle tactics. I really hate book battle tactics. I think it makes it hard to balance. I think it becomes just a waste of time because initially what the fun part of battle tactics were, I think it was the, oh God, the Monster Edition? I think it was the Monster Edition. And it was fun because everybody had the same ones. And, it favored monsters. You had to bring a monster in your list. If your army didn't have monsters, you were kind of screwed. So that kind of sucked. But it was just fun because you'd be like, okay, I move my 3 monsters forward. I get a point. I get bonus points. And then, I'm going to have a monster kill your monster. I'm going to do this where I kill a monster. Like, everything was kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this thing in the game. And it created different scenarios. But when you had book battle tactics and you had all these like weird battle tactics, like charge 2 enemies and then retreat 2 allied units and then like cast a spell that can't be unbound. And at first it's like, okay, I could do that. But it just becomes like, it's not fun. Like, you're like, all right, turn 1, I'm going to cast a spell because I'm outside of the 30 inches or whatever. And you cast it and you're like, cool. I got it, and I'm not going to cast anymore. Like, it's not fun. And then you're like, well, I want to cast my spells, but I want to get my battle tactic because battle tactics are extremely crucial to winning the game. If you miss a battle tactic, you're like, I hope my opponent misses one because otherwise I'm going to lose. Like, and it feels like it shouldn't be like that. So I'm excited they're going to probably like a 40k scoring system because I actually really like the way 40k scoring works with like primary objectives, secondary objectives, and I especially like drawing cards. I think it's fun where you have the cards and you draw and you're like, oh, I got this one, I'm gonna try to do that this turn. I think it just creates more dynamic games and more fun games instead of I've constructed my list to do my 5 battle tactics and they're like just some are like book battle tactics. Like I run my clan rats, I retreat 2 clan rat packs, cool. And then somebody else is like, I have to do like 50 mortal wounds this turn. I have to Like, I think they were cool at the start when you only had a small amount of them, and then they just got out of control when everybody had their own. You didn't know what your opponent had. You had to sit there and figure out which battle tactic you were. The amount of times I had to be like, all right, which battle tactics have I done? Which ones do I still have left? Can I pull them off? It's just, it felt like a waste of time too. So I think there's much better ways of scoring, and I hope this new scoring system is much better. And I think it will be, especially grand strategies as well. Half the games I played, we'd like forget our grand strategies, or it would rarely come up, or the game would get finished by then. It was a mess. And then the 3-inch objective range being a thing is, I think it's all right. You know, I think they're trying to make everything kind of similar, because 40k is 3-inch objectives, and currently Sigmar 6, but whatever. I think it's fine. I guess they're doing it for some reason. I really don't know. I'm mainly just concerned about the scoring system. So I'm really hoping battle tactics are gone, and I think they are going to be gone. Speaking of which, we now have the double turn, which is one of the biggest parts of Age of Sigmar people complain about, I guess, or discuss or talk about, right? So according to the Warhammer community article, double turn has been fine-tuned into a knife-edge decision with a clever twist to scoring. Okay, so what does this mean? It has been fine-tuned into a knife-edge decision with clever twist to scoring. So obviously, if you win the double turn and you're like, I'm gonna go ahead and take it, there's gonna be some sort of high risk, high reward type of situation here, right? Like, you're taking the double turn, but something might go terribly wrong, or you might be giving up something. So like, maybe if you take the double turn, your opponent has the ability to score more points. Maybe they get another bonus objective they can take. Maybe you just get one less point for doing the objective. Like, I honestly don't know what they're gonna do, because they've experimented with things with the double turn before in terms of missions you can play, right? Like, they'll be like, oh, if you go second, you can remove an objective, right? Something extremely powerful like that, where you're like, wow, I might go second because I can remove an objective. That's pretty good. Or you get a bonus command point, or you get whatever, right? They've tried numerous ways to fix the double turn, and it's still pretty strong. And there's rarely a time where you don't take the double turn. Most of the time, you're still, you know, no matter the incentive, you're like, I have the opportunity to like move my units, buff, shoot, cast spells, like do all this stuff, and you're just gonna take it again, right? Fight first. So I'm curious to see what they do. I genuinely am. I'm not sure what they'll do. There's like numerous ways they can go with it, but I thought they were gonna remove it. I guess they're not removing it. I mean, it's all right. I don't hate the double turn, but I am curious to see how they're gonna do this. So some other big changes they made: weapon ranges are gone, which is great. I've always hated weapon ranges. I think it was dumb. I hated measuring them. New core rules, which obviously color-coded abilities, I think, is a good one. I actually like that a lot. I think color-coded abilities is going to help a lot of players, especially new players, for learning armies and stuff like that. And even for just remembering when to do what for playing the game, because there's a lot going on all the time. And then more opportunities for reactive gameplay in your opponent's turn, which this one kind of surprised me, because I feel like there already are a good amount of reactive opportunities in your opponent's turn. Like, you can redeploy, you can unleash hell, you can like all out defense, and you know, you are kind of constantly reacting. So they must have added more to that, which again, I'm curious to see what they've done with that, because that means there's maybe, I honestly don't know, because like there's already a lot of reacting, so there's even more reacting now. Do you get like, I genuinely don't know. So I'm curious to see what they do with that. But I mean, hey, the more you can keep the opponent not, because like, let's face it, whenever you're in your opponent's turn, it gets kind of boring, right? You're sitting there, you're looking at your phone, you're just like, all right, whatever. A lot of times I'm like, all right, waiting for my redeploy. Let's see what he does. I'm going to redeploy that. All right. And then you go back to your phone. So I don't know what they're gonna do to add more reactive gameplay, but I guess we'll see. I mean, I'm hopeful for that. It's always a good thing. Well, not always, but I'm hoping it's a good thing. And then the biggest things I want to talk about are the phases, because I think one of my least favorite parts with 40K is they removed the psychic phase, right? And I thought the psychic phase was cool. It's pretty much just the magic phase. And then they made psychic just feel bad. I don't know what they did. I don't know how they came to this conclusion, but like, because I'm playing Tyranids, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I got like psychic stuff. And then I'm like, what does it do? And then it like doesn't do anything. And they're like, oh, you just take more damage from certain things. And like, it just screws you over. And I'm like, so you just don't want it. Like, it's just an active detriment to your war scroll. When before you're like, oh yeah, I'm like psychic, I'm like doing cool shit, I'm like casting stuff, and now it's like, yeah, you just get shit on, idiot. Like, okay, so I don't want them to do that with magic, and I don't think they're gonna do it with magic. I think they are gonna keep magic, and what I hope they do, and what I think they're gonna do, is I think they're gonna go the way of Warhammer Old World, and they're gonna have magic cast in separate phases, which is why I'm talking about this in the phases, because I love Old World magic. It's still very strong, and I don't think they're going to go full Old World magic system, but I would like magic to be phase-based, because it does add another element of thinking and strategy to every phase. So I think one of the big issues with magic right now is you're like, all right, top of the turn, you know, I'm going to cast do my like command ability stuff, you know, rally, do all these things, and then here comes magic, right? If you don't have magic, sit back. You don't get to do anything. It's magic time. It may as well just be the magic phase, because if you're Seraphon like me, I'm like, all right, I got like 12 spells to cast right now, so buckle up, right? And I think it's too much in one phase. And so what I'm really hoping they do with magic is they go the old world of like, okay, you have movement spells, you have shooting phase spells like magic missiles, you have your charge phase spells, you have combat spells, and then you have like the actual command phase spells. So I think that's the best way to go about it. I think breaking up magic into the different phases just feels better. I think it especially feels better for your opponent, who doesn't feel like everything's being thrown at them at once. And I love the fact that it also makes mages feel more dynamic, because right now it's like, all right, I'm sitting there, I buff, mortal wound blast, meteors, buff, debuff, okay. Right, but in this, it's like, okay, I'm gonna cast my movement spells, I'm gonna give you some speed, I'm gonna give you flying, all right, let's move up. And then you get to shooting, and it's like, all right, my mage is also gonna shoot with his magical shots, like his magic missiles. And you're like, all right, cool. And then you get to the charge phase, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, buff him up with this charge spell. And you're like, all right. And then you get to combat, and if he's in combat, you know, he can cast some combat spells if he's in combat, right? If not, you're like, I guess he can't cast them. And like, it just makes magic feel more fluid. It makes the game just flow better. It makes it feel more like an actual battle, and not like he's just vomiting up magic at the start of the turn. And I think that's what they're gonna go for. And I don't even think, like how in Old World you can upgrade to like level 2 wizard from a level 1, you go to level 4 from level 3. There's like all these different things. I don't think they're gonna do that. They may have a universal special rule about like wizard level. Maybe they even take that from Old World, but I think it would be something like, you are what you are, right? If you're a level 2 wizard, that's what you get. You're a level 2 wizard, you get +2 to cast. Boom, right? They might even just have that. Like a Slan is automatically a level 3 wizard. They get +3 to cast. You're done, right? There's no like buying and selling spell. There's no lore familiars where you get to pick, or maybe there is one where you, well, I think you would just pick your spell. I don't think they're going to make you roll for your spells in Age of Sigmar. I don't know. But we'll see. I don't even know if how they're gonna do spells. Like maybe they'll have a big generic spell category, and then you'll have your own spells for what. I don't know. But I think the biggest thing I want is I just want phase-based magic, and I think they're gonna do that. So I'm really hoping for that. Then, you know, you have your command phase. That's fine. You have your movement phase. You got your shooting, you got your charging. I think that's all fine. Combat. I guess I could talk about combat here, where I think the combat phase, and I'm mainly just gonna be talking about like actual War Scroll combat here. I think the biggest issue I have with current combat in Age of Sigmar is how much power creep has happened. I remember at the start of Age of Sigmar 2.0, I didn't play at the start of 2.0. I guess I played halfway through. It was like in the middle of Age of Sigmar 2. You would look at a book and it was like, oh, this guy's 4x4s, 5x4s, 4s by 3s. Like, if you had something crazier than that, you were crazy. I guess a lot of people did have rerolls, so that kind of made up for it because you were re-rolling a lot of everything you rolled. And I'm all in favor of not having rerolls. I'm not even gonna lie, or like having very small amounts of re-rolling. So I think it just slows the game down. But at the same time, you can't just go ahead and give everybody like 2s by 2s, right? Or the champion lot. What's the single hero champion? It's like 5 attacks, 3x3 -1/2 damage. You can't just give everybody 5 attack, 3x3 -1/2 damage for like a foot hero, right? It was like everybody has it. And so I think with them going back and lining up models and looking at each one, I think that's going to help them to figure out where things need to be. I think dialing back on mortal wounds is big. I really hate mortal wounds. I'm not going to lie. I really hate mortal wounds. And I think mortal wounds should be like special wounds. I don't think everybody should have mortal wounds. I think it should be reserved for certain abilities. I think it should be reserved for like really special attacks, like a big magical attack or something. Maybe, I don't know. The mortal wounds are just too prevalent in the current game. And it's one of the ththings that I've hated. Like, the reason people ran Lumineth Sentinels is you're just ranged mortal wounding them from like 30 inches away. Like, it's done. And especially if you're going into an army that doesn't have a ward save, like Coalesced Seraphon, you're just screwed. You're just like, I guess I'm dead. And it shouldn't be like that. It should at least give you an option of like having a bad save. Like, sure, you're gonna have a bad attack or something, but I don't know. I just, oh my god, the amount of times I also hated like the Corn, Bloodthirster AoE mortal wound bubble. That made me want to just rip my hair out. I hate. And in fact, it's one of the reasons I hated the new Seraphon, but it's one of the reasons I'm actually excited for the new Index, because I really don't like playing Seraphon right now. Coalesced is too weak. They've also been nerfed because of Starborn, so like they suffer because of Starborn thriving. And Starborn isn't even fun to play because you just sit there, and it was fun initially when I'm just like, and you're just like vomiting up 40 mortal wounds from Lord Croak in round 1, and half their army is just getting obliterated. But then you're like, this sucks. It's like a play experience. Like, I don't want to schedule a game with somebody and then show up and go, and they're just dead. You know what I mean? And it's just, it's not fun. So, and I think one of the big reasons for that is mortal wounds, right? Mortal wounds and phase-based magic. So, I think that's a way to solve both of those things. And I think it's just more fun when the actual War Scrolls revolve around more of the mechanics of the scroll, like Rend being a thing and like having high Rend to take out big monsters, or like maybe you only have high Rend against monsters and then they have normal Rend against other things, you know, and just having like, it doesn't even have to be old world tiered dice rolls, but like less dice I think would be a little better. Or like maybe, you know, having the things to roll a lot of dice end up rolling on high, like 5s by 5s. But that, it also kind of slows the game down too, because if you're going 5s by 5s, you roll like 60 dice and you're like, I got 4 hits, right? I don't know. I'm curious to see what they do with that. But the biggest thing I want is less mortal wounds. Like that's it. I think from the combat phase, from the entire game damage perspective, I want less mortal wounds because they're annoying. Because then with mortal wounds, then ward saves become super important. That's why everybody's taking ward saves. And like super stacking ward save, it's annoying. And then the last thing I really want to talk about is the Battleshock phase. There's plenty of other things I could talk about, but we're going on 30 minutes. I do want to talk about Battleshock. I don't know what they're going to do with the Battleshock phase. I don't mind it currently. I really hope they get rid of Rally. I hate Rally. I think it's dumb. I really hate Rally. I'm not gonna lie. It should, if you rally, it should be on 6-ups. Like, I think 6-up rally is the only thing I would want. I think 4 and 5-up rally is the most. It's just, I hate it. You just spend all this time killing stuff, and then all of a sudden, boom, half of them are back. Like, it's not fun. It's not fun to play against. That was my rally rant. Sorry. I don't know. There's ways to go with Battleshock. I don't think they should go the 40k route. I don't really like the 40k Battleshock system that much. Like, it's okay, but I prefer something where, like, you do have guys just run away. Like, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't even mind if they just kept the current system, honestly. Like, it's fine to me. I don't know what they'll do, but I don't really care. I think it's fine. So overall, I think I'm pretty excited. I think they're gonna do a good job. I hope they fix a lot of the issues I had, and I think they will. And I think at the end of the day, I want them to keep the lore and the flavor of Age of Sigmar, because that's probably my favorite part about it, is how well it feels like I'm playing an army when I'm playing, or how, you know, when I play Nurgle, I'm thinking in my head, I want to disease them. I want to be hard to kill. I want to be annoying, even though I know that I'm slow. I know that I'm like, that's their biggest weakness. Like, you're slow, you can't get around and stuff, and that's how it plays, right? And I'm genuinely hoping that they keep that, and it seems like they will from what they've hinted at. So, oh, the last thing I want to mention was battalions. I hope they get a little more creative with battalions, or think of something new, because currently you just either take the battalion where you 1-drop, or you take the battalion where you get a bonus artifact. That's like it. So I hope they get something better than that, because I'd rather just not have battalions at that point. You know what I mean? I think that they used to have a cool battalion system back in Age of Sigmar 2.0, where you would run the specific units and you got abilities that were, you know, specific to them. I'd love that battalion system back. I think that was a lot more fun, to be honest. So either way, let me know what you think down in the comments section below. What you think what you're excited for, what you're not excited for, what worries you, whatever it might be. Just any comments. I'm gonna go get a drink of water, because my throat is dying right now. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Okay? Okay. See ya.